My black gay roommate fell in love the moment he saw me like this. It all began with a simple accident, the kind of moment you don't think twice about until it changes everything. That night, I thought I was alone in the dorm room, changing after a long day, unaware that my roommate had just walked in, the way his eyes locked on me, the silence that stretched between us, and the sudden rush of heat in the air. It was something I could never have prepared for. He wasn't just my roommate. He was someone I had started to trust, someone I thought I knew. But in that instant, I saw something raw and unspoken in his gaze, something that told me my world was about to shift. This isn't just a story about sharing a room. It's about sharing secrets, facing desires we never admitted, and discovering that sometimes the most unexpected moments uncover the truth we've both been hiding. Before we dive into this journey, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any of the powerful and emotional stories we share here. Stay with me, because what began as a moment of surprise between two roommates grew into a story of longing, fear, and the kind of connection that changes a person forever. And the way it ended, well, you'll see. When I first moved into that small college dorm in North Carolina, I thought the hardest part would be sharing my space with a stranger. The room was compact. 2 beds pressed against opposite walls, a pair of desks squeezed into the corners, and a single window that let in the glow of the street lamps at night. I had grown up in a quiet suburb where privacy was almost a given, so the idea of splitting my life with someone else felt intimidating. But I didn't know then that this roommate, Malik, would change everything I thought I understood about myself. The first day we met, Malik carried himself with a quiet confidence. He was tall, with dark skin that seemed to glow under the afternoon light, his hair cropped neatly, his smile cautious but real. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his voice carried warmth, like he meant every word. I noticed things about him I shouldn't have paid attention to. The way his laugh seemed to rise from deep in his chest. The way his eyes lingered when he was curious. It unsettled me, though I didn't want to admit why. We quickly fell into a routine. He had late-night study sessions, headphones on as he tapped his pencil against the desk. I'd usually lie back on my bed, pretend to scroll my phone while stealing glances at him across the room. We weren't close yet, not really, but there was something unspoken building in the silence between us. And then came that night, the moment everything shifted. I had just come back from the gym, sweat clinging to my shirt. The showers on our floor were full, so I decided to change quickly in the room. I thought Malik was still in the library, buried in his textbooks like always. I peeled off my shirt, tossing it aside, and stood there catching my breath in the dim glow of the desk lamp. That's when the door opened. Malik stepped in, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He stopped mid-step, his eyes locking on me. For a moment, time stretched thin. His gaze lingered longer than it should have, long enough for me to notice the way his breath caught, the way his expression shifted from surprise to something deeper, something I couldn't name. I froze shirtless, exposed in a way that felt different from anything I'd experienced before. It wasn't just about being seen. It was about how he was seeing me. His eyes weren't judgmental. They were searching, almost reverent. He cleared his throat, trying to mask it. "Didn't know you were back already," he said in a low tone, setting his bag down. I laughed nervously, reaching for another shirt. "Yeah, just got in." But the air between us had changed. I could feel it in the silence that followed, in the way he kept glancing at me from the corner of his eye. My heart beat faster than it should have. I didn't know what to make of it. The rest of the evening passed quietly, but I couldn't stop replaying that moment in my head. The way he had looked at me, it wasn't accidental. There was a charge in it, a spark I had felt too. Lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized I was standing at a crossroads. I could ignore it, pretend nothing had happened, and continue as if Malik were just another roommate. Or I could admit to myself what I already suspected, that I wanted to know what that look meant. I turned over, watching the faint outline of him across the room. His breathing was steady, but even in the dark, I sensed his thoughts were just as restless as mine. Something inside me shifted, and for the first time, I let the truth slip into my mind without resistance. I wanted to get closer to him. I didn't know what would come of it, friendship, rejection, something else entirely, but I knew I couldn't ignore the pull any longer. And so, as I closed my eyes at night, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I'd stop hiding. I would find a way to bridge the silence between us, no matter how terrifying it felt. What I didn't know was that Malik had made his own decision too, and that our choices were about to collide in ways neither of us could have predicted. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the thin curtains of our dorm window, painting streaks of gold across the floor. I woke earlier than usual, my mind restless in the decision I'd made the night before. Malik was still asleep across the room, his chest rising and falling in slow rhythm, the blanket tangled around his legs. There was something strangely peaceful about watching him like that. Unguarded, unaware, his face softened in the quiet of morning. But beneath that calm, my chest tightened with unease. I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at me when I was shirtless. That moment was burned into my memory, every detail as sharp as lightning. It wasn't just surprise, it was something else, something deeper. I couldn't decide if I was imagining it or if it had truly been there. I pushed myself out of bed quietly, showered, and tried to focus on the day. But no matter how much I distracted myself, my thoughts circled back to him. When Malik finally stirred, he rubbed his eyes and gave me a half smile. "Morning," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "Morning." I replied, my heart racing at something so ordinary. The day unfolded in fragments, classes, notes, cafeteria food, but the tension between us lingered like a shadow. Every time Malik leaned in to show me something in a textbook or brushed past me to grab his jacket, I felt an energy I couldn't name. It was subtle, like static before a storm, but it was there. That evening, I decided to test the waters. We were both at our desks, the room lit by the dim lamp, the hum of Malik's music faint in the background. I turned to him casually. "Hey!" I started, my tone lighter than I felt. "You want to grab something to eat off campus? Maybe get some fresh air?" He looked up, surprised. We usually ate in the cafeteria or alone. His brow lifted, and then a slow grin spread across his face. "Yeah, sure. Where were you thinking?" "There's that diner down the street," I said. "Heard the burgers are good." So we went. The diner was a small place, with neon lights buzzing faintly and the smell of fried food lingering in the air. We slid into a booth by the window. For the first time since we'd moved in together, it felt like we weren't just roommates. We were two people choosing to be there. We talked more than usual. Malik told me about his family back in Atlanta, his mother who worked 2 jobs, his younger brother who idolized him. He spoke with pride, but also with a weight I recognized. The pressure to be strong, to carry expectations. I shared about my own upbringing, how I'd always been the quiet kid, the one who never stirred much trouble but always kept a part of himself hidden. "You don't talk about yourself much," Malik said at one point, leaning forward, his eyes locked on me. "Maybe I don't think I'm that interesting," I answered with a small shrug. He shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You're wrong about that." The words caught me off guard. I looked away, pretending to study the menu, but inside, my pulse quickened. When the food arrived, the conversation shifted to lighter things, music, sports, our shared complaints about professors. But underneath it all, that same energy pulsed between us, unspoken but undeniable. After we finished, we walked back slowly, the night air cool against our skin. The campus was quiet, the street lamps casting pools of light across the sidewalks. For a while, we walked in silence, the tension thick enough to choke on. Then Malik spoke. About the other night. His voice was low, careful. My stomach dropped. "What about it?" He glanced at me, then looked away quickly. "Nothing. Forget it." But I couldn't forget. Not when he'd finally opened the door to what I'd been thinking about nonstop. "No," I said, my voice steadied and I felt. "I don't want to forget. You looked at me different, didn't you?" He stopped walking, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might deny it. But then he let out a breath. "Yeah," he admitted softly. "I did." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. My chest tightened, my mind spinning. I searched his face for answers, for meaning, for the courage to ask the question I was afraid of. "Why?" I whispered, His eyes met mine, raw and unflinching. Because I see you, not just as a roommate, not just as some guy I share a room with. I see you, and I can't pretend I don't feel something. The words hit me like a shockwave. For so long, I had been hiding from my own feelings, convincing myself they didn't exist. Now, here he was saying aloud the thing I had been too afraid to name. I swallowed hard. Malik, but before I could continue, a group of students passed us, laughing loudly. The moment shattered, fragile as glass. Malik shoved his hands deeper into his pockets, his shoulders tense. "Forget it," he muttered. "We should get back." I wanted to stop him, to tell him I didn't want to forget, that his words had set something alive in me. But I stayed quiet, the fear still stronger than my courage. Back in the dorm, the silence between us was deafening. Malik climbed into bed quickly, turning to face the wall. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every glance. And in that restless darkness, I realized something. This wasn't just about Malik. It was about me, about the truth I'd been avoiding for years. I wanted him, not just his friendship, not just his presence. I wanted all the things I was too afraid to name. But wanting came with risks. Risks of rejection, of judgment, of changing everything between us. Still, as I watched the faint outline of his back across the room, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't go back to pretending anymore. The only question was, what would I do about it? And what would happen if he wanted the same? The next few days were almost unbearable. After fire alarm night, when Malik and I finally admitted, without really admitting, that there was something between us, the energy in our dorm room changed completely. Every glance felt heavier, every silence more loaded. We went about our routines, but I was hyper-aware of him in a way I couldn't hide anymore. He must have felt it too, though he didn't say much. Malik was quieter than usual, more withdrawn, and that worried me. I didn't know if he was regretting what happened, or if he was just as scared as I was. By Friday, tension turned into something I couldn't ignore. We were in the cafeteria, sitting at a corner table with trays of food. Neither of us touched. His friends from the basketball team sat a few tables away, loud and carefree. One of them called out, "Yo, Malik, you coming to the party tonight?" He raised his hand in acknowledgement, but didn't answer. I glanced at him, wondering if he'd invite me. He didn't. Afterward, on our way back to the dorm, I asked lightly, "So, party tonight?" "Yeah, maybe," he said, his voice neutral. "You going?" "Not sure." I studied his face. "You don't sound too excited." He shrugged. "Not really in the mood." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Besides, I don't want to leave you hanging." My chest tightened. The way he said it, soft, careful, it felt like an admission. But before I could respond, a group of students brushed past us, laughing, and the moment dissolved again. That night, while Malik went to the gym, I stayed behind the room, trying to study, but my mind wandered endlessly. When he came back, sweaty and tired, I couldn't stop myself from staring as he pulled his shirt over his head, tossing it aside. His chest glistened with sweat, his muscles taut under the dim light. He caught me looking. For a split second, he didn't move. Then, with the smallest grin, he said, "You're staring." Heat rushed to my face. "Sorry, I was just—" "Don't apologize," he cut in, his voice low. "I didn't say I minded." That broke me. My pulse quickened, my throat went dry. The room suddenly felt too small, too hot. I wanted to say something, anything, but before I could, my phone buzzed with a message from my cousin. "Emergency at home. Call me." I excused myself, stepping out into the hallway to take the call. My cousin explained that my younger brother had gotten into a fight at school, and my parents were furious. It wasn't life-threatening, but it pulled me out of my bubble with Malik and reminded me of the mess waiting for me outside of our dorm. By the time I returned, Malik was lying in bed, scrolling his phone. The mood had shifted again, and I let it go, but the real storm came the next day. Saturday afternoon, Malik's friends dragged him to the party after all. He invited me this time, almost reluctantly, and I agreed. I wanted to be near him, even if it was risky. The party was held at Fraternity House. Loud music, flashing lights, people pressed together with red cups in their hands. I stuck close to Malik at first, but he was soon pulled into the crowd by his teammates. I watched him laugh, surrounded by people, his confidence glowing under the neon lights. That's when it happened. One of the girls, tall and confident, slipped her arm around his shoulders. She leaned in close, whispering something in his ear that made him laugh. My stomach twisted, jealousy clawing at me in a way I'd never felt before. I knew I had no claim on him. Not yet, but watching her press so close to him was unbearable. I turned away, trying to drown the feeling with a sip of warm beer. But when I looked back, she was still there, her hand resting on his chest. And Malik, he wasn't pushing her away. Something inside me snapped. I pushed through the crowd, out the door into the cool night air. My chest heaved, not from the alcohol, but from the weight of confusion and hurt. Moments later, Malik followed me outside. "Hey," he called, jogging after me. "What the hell? Why'd you leave?" I spun around, the words spilling before I could stop them. "Because I couldn't stand watching her all over you." He stopped dead, shock flashing across his face. "You were jealous?" "Yes," I admitted, my voice breaking. "Of course I was. You say you see me, that you feel something, and then you stand there letting her—" "Wait!" He cut me off, his tone sharp. "You think I wanted that? You think I even cared? I didn't push her away because it didn't matter. She doesn't matter." "Then why did it feel like it did?" I shot back, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Because you're too scared to say what we both already know. You're jealous because you want me, and I want you too. But you keep pulling back every time we get close." His words hit me like a thunderclap. The truth hung between us, undeniable. My breath caught, my chest burning with the weight of it. Before I could respond, a group of drunk students stumbled outside, laughing and shouting, breaking the moment. Malik glanced at them, then back at me, his face raw with emotion. "This isn't the place," he said quietly. "Let's go." We walked back in silence, the tension boiling. When we reached the dorm, we barely made it inside before it erupted again. "I'm scared, Malik," I confessed, my voice shaking. "I've never felt this before. I don't know how to handle it." He stepped closer, his eyes intense. "You think I'm not scared too? You think it's easy for me? But I'm not going to hide from it anymore. The question is, are you?" The room was silent, except for the sound of our breathing. His words carved into me, forcing me to face the truth I'd been running from. And as he stood there, inches away, waiting for my answer, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. If I didn't find the courage now, I might lose him forever. The air in our dorm that night felt heavier than ever, like the walls themselves were listening, waiting for what would happen next. Malik's words kept ringing in my ears. I'm not going to hide from it anymore. The question is, are you? I sat on my bed, staring at him across the room. He stood by his desk, fists still clenched, breathing hard as though he'd run a mile. His eyes locked onto mine, unflinching, demanding an answer. And I realized then that silence would be its own kind of betrayal. "I don't want to hide either," I said quietly. The words shook on my tongue, but they were true. "I'm just afraid." Malik's jaw softened, but he didn't move. Afraid of what? I swallowed. Of what it means. Of what people will think. Of losing whatever this is between us if I say it out loud. He exhaled slowly, running a hand across his face. Then, with quiet intensity, he said, "We've already crossed that line. There's no going back." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain outside tapped against the window like a nervous heartbeat. Finally, Malik stepped closer, slow, deliberate, giving me every chance to pull away. But I didn't. He sat down on the edge of my bed, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him. His voice dropped lower, more vulnerable than I had ever heard it. "Tell me you don't feel it, and I'll walk away. I'll keep being your roommate, your friend, whatever you need me to be. But if you do feel it, then stop running from me." I looked into his eyes, dark and searching, and I knew I couldn't lie. "I feel it," I whispered. I felt it for weeks. The tension snapped like a bowstring. Malik's shoulders dropped with relief, his lips curving into the smallest smile. Finally, he breathed. Then, cautiously, he reached out and placed his hand over mine. The touch was warm, steady, grounding. My pulse thundered in my ears, but instead of fear, I felt a strange calm. It was like my whole life I'd been walking in fog, and now, suddenly I could see. We sat like that for a while, just holding on, until Malik leaned closer. "So what now?" he asked softly. I laughed nervously. "I guess we figured out. Together." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You make it sound simple." "Maybe it doesn't have to be as complicated as we think," I said, surprising myself with the confidence in my voice. "Maybe it just means choosing not to be afraid." His expression shifted, something tender, almost reverent. "You have no idea how long I've been waiting to hear you say that." But before the moment could settle, life barged back in. The door to our room swung open suddenly, and two of Malik's basketball teammates stepped in, laughing and carrying fast food bags. They froze when they saw us, Malik sitting on my bed, our hands tangled together. For a beat, the room was silent. "Yo," one of them said slowly, his smile fading. "Are we interrupting something?" Malik's grip on my hand tightened. My instinct was to let go, to hide. But he didn't move. He looked at them squarely, his voice calm but firm. "Yeah, you are." The words hung heavy in the air. His friends exchanged glances, then muttered something about leaving and backed out of the room quickly. The door shut, leaving us in silence again. My heart hammered. "Malik, what if they tell people?" "Let them," he said, his jaw set. "I'm done living like I'm ashamed." "Are you?" I thought about it, really thought about it. My whole life I had avoided risks, kept the safest version of myself on display. But sitting there with Malik beside me, I realized that hiding would mean losing him, and that was a risk I couldn't take. "No," I said firmly, "I'm not ashamed." The relief in his eyes was immediate. He leaned forward then, closing the last bit of distance between us. And when his lips finally touched mine, it wasn't fireworks or explosions. It was something deeper. It was quiet, certain, like a truth we had both known, but had been too afraid to speak. The kiss was brief, but it left me breathless. We pulled back, our foreheads resting together, both of us smiling like idiots. "Guess we can't take that back now," I said, half laughing. "Good," he replied. "I don't want to." The next morning, the dorm buzzed with whispers. Malik's friends hadn't wasted time. By breakfast, people were already looking at us differently. Some curious, some judgmental. I braced myself for the sting of gossip. But Malik walked beside me with his head high, and somehow that gave me courage too. Later that week, the basketball coach called him in. I waited outside nervously, expecting the worst. But when Malik came out, his expression was calm. "He told me it's my life," he explained. "As long as I play hard, he doesn't care who I am outside the court." It wasn't full acceptance, but it was enough. Enough to remind me that maybe the world wasn't as unforgiving as I'd feared. The hardest part, though, was telling my family. When I called home, my voice shook. I didn't even use the word boyfriend. I just said there was someone I cared about, and that he happened to be my roommate. The silence on the other end was long, but eventually my mom sighed. "We love you," she said. "We just need time." It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And for once, I was okay with that. As the weeks passed, Malik and I learned what it meant to be more than friends. We still studied late, still teased each other about bad habits, still argued over who left the window open when it was freezing. But there were new things now, too. The stolen smiles, the quiet moments when his hand found mine under the table, the comfort of knowing I didn't have to hide anymore. Looking back, I realized the real turning point wasn't the kiss, or even his confession. It was the moment I chose to stop running, to stand in the truth, no matter how terrifying it felt. One night, months later, Malik and I sat by the window watching the city lights. He leaned against me, his warmth steady and real. "Funny how it all started," he said, grinning. "Just you standing there shirtless, looking like you didn't know I existed." I laughed, nudging him. "And you staring like you'd never seen skin before." He laughed too, then grew quiet. "I'm glad you didn't pull away. From me. From this." I turned to him, my chest swelling. Me too. Because the truth was simple. Loving him wasn't the scary part. The scary part had been hiding. And once I let go of that fear, everything else fell into place. This wasn't just a story about roommates. It was about choosing honesty over fear, love over shame, and courage over silence. And as I sat there with Malik beside me, our fingers intertwined. I knew I'd never go back to pretending again.